Hello, hola, buenas a todos. It is the Chancleta Generation Podcast. Hola, hola. I am Clemencia Herrera, and I am a Latina business owner and founder of Moyer Studio, which is an advertising agency that speaks to Latinos in the U.S. because guess what? We all deserve the best advertising.
And I'm Cecilia del Cid, an environmental and social justice practitioner, Latin American, immigrant from Guatemala, and community weaver. Hello, ¿cómo estás, amor?
Hola, Ceci, we missed you last time.
So sorry.
And I am so happy that you're back.
Yes, I'm here.
Yes.
Thank you.
And and along with Ceci, who's back today with us, we have the amazing Claudia Thompson here. Hello.
Hello.
So I'm super excited about Claudia being here because she is a managing director of BNI New York and head of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion panel for BNI US. Yes. And she has also lots of experience in working with the community, giving back to the community. She's always involved in some sort of fundraising, sports stuff. So more specifically, she is the chair of the November Project. You've been doing that forever.
Yeah.
Right?
President of the board now. It's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. So she's also former board chair of the Boston Women's Fund and founding director for Boston Business Women and the Women's Networking Organization with over 38,000 members. Welcome, Claudia.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. Yes, Clem, it's been a minute. We have to see each other in real life again soon.
Yeah, so Claudia and I, we go way back. And sometimes you and me were the only women, or sometimes we were the only women of color in many, many situations. And so we had lots of conversations about this and about the topic that we're going to talk about today. Because, well, do you want to just explain to us just a little bit what is BNI and like how you got involved, and then we can jump into why you're doing this now?
Yes. So BNI stands for Business Network International. We have over 11,000 chapters in 100 countries around the world. We do have a LATAM region, so all in Latin America as well. But we have everywhere in 6 continents, and it's basically a networking referral organization, one person per profession per chapter. So of course we need to continue to launch more chapters. It was founded in 1985. I joined 20 years ago when I jumped into sales. And so that opportunity really catapulted my career. I think I was always a natural networker because my mother was a networker. And but it really did build my business. And I was passionate about it. 10 years later, I was asked to build chapters in Boston. I think we built 23 overall in Mass. And then I started during COVID. Many bad things happened during COVID, but some of the great things that happened was that I was able to do BNI full time and have more of a presence. Of course, after the murder of George Floyd, diversity suddenly mattered more for a minute. So they started the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion panel. And I'm happy to say so many of those initiatives have been killed at that time, and we've only grown. So I'm proud of that. I host a monthly webinar for DEI, different topics, of course. It's Latinx Hispanic Heritage Month, so we have one of those, but we've done ones for veterans. We've done them for other people as well. So that's the bulk of it. I'm very passionate. I've always felt that the formula of BNI worked, but I wanted to see more of you and me there. And so we are becoming more and more inclusive. So yeah, that's the bulk of it.
Yeah. And, one of the things that we spoke about in our last episode with Jordy is the, many entrepreneurs and business owners of color have a hard time taking their business to the next level because they don't have the network available to help them secure funding, to help them get other clients, to help them get resources, etc. And so, it might not be for everyone, but definitely, some of these networking models are really important just for other people to meet other people. So definitely, especially, having initiatives to have more people of color is really, really important. It's just like a small piece of the rest of the puzzle for people of color.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. And I think that's why BNI has been working, because it's people that would normally not connect. Yeah. Right. If you think about the people that were in our chapter, that's how it was. So, yeah.
Yeah. So it was going back to the topic that we're going to talk about today. When I met you, Claudia, I had no idea that you were a Latina. And yes. And then you mentioned, it was like, oh, yeah, my family's from Panama. I was like, what? Right. And so.
Yeah, you're like, my parents are in Panama. I was like, yes.
Yes, my parents were in Panama at the time. Yeah, that's right. So yeah, it was a really interesting conversation that we had, in which, like, you brought up to me like, oh yeah, people don't believe me that I'm a Latina, or people, they just don't know what to do with me when I tell them that I'm a Latina. So there seems to be, as we Latinos are, just spreading our branches in this country, and we have been for many generations, but like more and more as we integrate with the rest of the country, people are getting married with all kinds of different people, and Latinos are getting married with all kinds of other different demographics. And so a bunch of kids are coming out, being multicultural, multiracial, and this is like where you came in, that you were like, yeah, that's me. And then, where do we put me, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? Because, colorism, I think if you are Caribbean or Latin or both, in my case, we experience that a lot, right? Like, the lighter that you are, the closer your proximity to whiteness, means that you are more privileged, right? That you are afforded more things than anyone else. And that's pretty much true across the board everywhere in the country. I think for myself, growing up in New York, right? And there was only two types of Latinos mostly, right? Like Puerto Ricans and Dominicans. So I really didn't fit in because I was this other thing. They're like, what are you? So they just assumed I was Dominican, but my best friend and my closest friends were Puerto Rican. And if you know anything about the battles in New York between the two, it was just very interesting. I constantly felt like I just didn't have a box to fit in. Because, my abuelita, when she was the one that kind of like was with me when my parents were in grad school, and when I was younger, and my family, I mean, if I identify with a culture, I identify as Panamanian. I mean, that was what I grew up with. And so to try to explain that to people, and they look at me or how I sound, they just make assumptions that I'm not that, because I look a certain way. And so that was really challenging. So my parents are both identify as Black. I would say, it's weird because my grandparents were pretty light. My dad is darker but my mom is definitely darker. And but I have, two of my aunts and my uncle have green eyes, so like they're like full same parents, and they're my dad's parents. So kind of growing up in that world, I felt it in my family, but I definitely felt it outside of my family too. And I think that's always like, I always have to lead with, just like yourself, I have to tell you what I am rather than just being me, so that I think that's probably the toughest, depending on the area. If I'm in Washington Heights in Manhattan, they're going to assume I'm Dominican. That's not even like a question, right? But from many parts of the country, they're not going to assume right away. So I have to tell them.
So you mentioned colorism, but I think you're also touching on something really important for us, which is the anti-Blackness in our community. So there is that proximity, like I'm mestiza, but like I don't claim indigeneity. I'm from Guatemala, but I am dark in my family, and I know there's always like things that happen when a new baby is born. People are like, "Oh, está tan blanquito," and I'm like, "It's until he goes to the beach. Don't worry, it will change." Like, and when I live in the Northeast now, and I'm like, I've become, in my family, I have a sister, she was always lighter skinned than me. And when I moved over here, then we'd be like, "Oh, you lost your tan." And I was like, "I know, it's so sad." And like, I've just kind of gotten really pale in like a way that is just, feels very like I grew up just by being in Guatemala every day, you get dark, right? Like,
same when you live in Miami.
Yeah, and like,
yes.
Just, but it's that desire to kind of be in that, like, and I know a lot of, it happens across in the tropics, right? Like people who are like spend a lot of like protecting themselves from the sun, and what does it mean to like everyone should protect themselves for health reasons from the sun, but like there's that desire of like that proximity to whiteness you mentioned, but also deep, and we don't talk about it. I know I didn't have language for it until I met other Afro-Latin, a woman from Nicaragua, which is a dear friend, Nicaraguan mom, Southern father, so like she identifies as Nicaraguan and African American. So there's like this idea of like her racial identity as a Black person, and then her ethnic identity, but also the deep anti-Blackness in the Latin American and Latinx communities in the United States.
Yeah, no, that's that. You hit on it.
But
right
there's
there.
also like there's also the fact of like, you don't fully identify as African American either. You're an Afro Latina, and so like where in the spectrum of like Blackness do you fit? You know what I mean? So it's kind of like, because it's a different history, it's a different ancestry, and so it's a it's a very different background, and to try to fit in kind of thing.
But I also think it's like the difference between race and ethnicity. Like an African American and Afro Latin are both Black, and ethnically they have a different ancestry and root, and I think we as Latinos tend to like don't make a distinction. That is problematic. That's for me what's problematic, that we don't understand that difference.
Yes, yeah, I that's exactly, I feel so seen right now, Ceci, what you're saying, because that is people used to automatically oh, how is it being African American? I'm like, I wouldn't know. I mean I am a first generation American, right? Being born here, so I guess for all intents and purposes I could be, but my culture and my ethnicity 100% is rooted in Latin and Caribbean culture. So I cannot relate to I mean the ship from Africa, it just kept dropping people off, so I can relate to that part of it, but it's a different culture, the way that it was set up in different countries. But there was still anti-Blackness of all of that, right? Like white supremacy still lies under all of that. So I think, but yeah, it's harder when it comes from your own people. And just because we don't look the same, I think that's the part that's difficult for people, that they will give somebody more of an ear or more credibility because they look different. They look indigenous or something, lighter than me, or their hair texture is different. I mean, even myself, I never got braids until 2018 when I went to Thailand, because I was like, I'm not going to find someone that could do my hair, and it's probably going to be a hot mess over there. So I had to go to a conference, and I was like, you know what? I am not going to play that. And it was the first time I had braids, and I was very nervous in my lifetime to get anything too ethnic, because my hair is probably, like more like Clem's. It's very curly naturally. People used to give me a hard time, like, your hair's curly. What is that? It's not black, but it's, like, I used to just get a lot of slack growing up. And so I think to wear this and to be proud of it now, But again, that would almost take away from being Latina, right? Like that would take away from my Latin culture to others. So I think I really just was trying to be as, you know, and that's internalized racism, unfortunately. Just where I grew up. I grew up in a very racist area in New York City. So
yeah. But this is also like the people's desire or custom to like put people in boxes, right? Like you have to be something, right? Like who are you really? And then when you don't fit that small box, then it's weird, you know. And the thing is, you know, as I mentioned before, the more that we evolve as a country, the more mixed we are, the more fusioned we are. And so, you know, I've seen couples that like their kids are like black with blue eyes, and I've seen also like kids from like you know, Korean and African American couples, and you know, so it's like, where are we gonna put all these people, right? Like where, I guess that's like the, you know, the mindset of people, like where do we put these people? And same thing with Latinos, you know,